everyone. My name is Elizabeth Manns, and I'd like to welcome you to the April 4th Coalition Show. This is the June 24th, 2024 edition of the show. And the April 4th mission statement is, we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights and are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. You would think I was drinking today, but I haven't been. We support all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but as is our custom, we put the emphasis on Article 23. Dick?
Number 1, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment.
Number 2, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, pay,
compensation,
ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other social means.
And Michael, number 4.
Number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his or her interests.
Excellent. And as is our custom, we give a thank you and a shout out to Michael Putnam, who is a program director for the community radio station, WMNB LP 107.1, for airing the audio portions of our show on Fridays at 6 p.m., and to the fabulous staff here at NBCTC for helping us produce the show. So thank you, David Fabiano, Joanne Hurlbut, and Nicole A. Brown. So, Richard, what's on the agenda today?
Well, first I want to welcome Rachel joining us, and
Thank
Michael,
you.
and say we're sorry that Susan Rose couldn't make it today. But the first thing we want to talk about is there's a big march on Washington this Saturday. It's the Mass Poor Peoples and Low Wage Workers Assembly Moral March on Washington, being led by Reverend Dr. William Barber. So we have a video that they have on their website that we'd like to show, that we encourage people to go and participate, and then we'll react to what we see.
When COVID happened, poor people were dying at a rate already of 800 people a day. Before COVID, if you went to a funeral every single day, it would take you 600 years to attend all the funerals of the people who will die from the ravages of policy violence, poverty, and low wages in America in just 1 year. It would take you 2 years and 19 days to go to all of the funerals of the people that will die today, and oftentimes silence. Nobody talks about this political genocide, but we are determined today to remember their death and be a resurrection of voting power and voice power like never before.
Economic justice and saving this democracy are deeply connected. We, as a nation, must listen to the demands of the poor, who are pushing and will continue to push political candidates and elected leaders to lift from the bottom so that everybody can rise.
We are the poor, the marginalized, and the underpaid. And we are taking one step forward to say that everybody has a right to live.
Poverty is not the fault of those who are impoverished. It is caused by those who make the policy.
There are over 135 million poor and low-wage, low-income people in this nation.
The biggest block of potential voters by far is low-income, low-wage voters.
I can't afford medicine. Sometimes I have to skip because of the cost.
The farm worker community is tired of the violence imposed upon us by greed, exclusion, and denial of basic human rights.
Those folk that represented by that casket, poor and low-wage workers who are the most moral people in this country because they go to work every day believing, even though going to work is hazardous to their health.
I'm tired of working 70 to 80 hours a week and still not have money for the necessity of bills. I'm tired of getting sick and not being able to go see the doctor. Having to make a choice to pay between rent or the light bill or food or clothes.
You cannot claim to care about families and a culture of life and then do everything in your power to rob people of equal access to resources and to force them to live in poverty.
Leadership of both parties had waged war on poor people and low-wage workers.
And this government has treated people experiencing poverty, including their military families, with disdainful, deliberate, malicious neglect.
So the truth is that my son died from poverty.
We refuse to accept poverty as the fourth leading cause of death.
The fourth leading cause of death in this, the richest country in the world.
We march today for our children and the generations to come.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
We will voice our demands and register our vote.
When we stand up and when we stand together, things change.
There is the electorate that is, and then there is the electorate that should be.
34 million eligible poor and low-income voters did not vote in 2016. If just 20% of those voters in swing states were mobilized around an agenda, they could change the political outcome of every election. So we're launching the most massive voter mobilization and turnout campaign in history of poor and low-wage voters, allies, and religious leaders.
People are dying, but we know it doesn't have to be this way. And so we are calling on everyone to join us in this Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival.
We are here, we will be seen, we will be heard, and our power will be felt. We don't need to be an insurrection. We are a resurrection that will be felt across this country. Are you ready? 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 We are a resurrection, and we are ready. And we won't be silent anymore.
So Dick, before we kibitz about this, are there going to be other ones besides the Washington D.C., or are they across the country, or is it just
I think it's just in Washington.
just in Washington? I was curious
Except
about
they were showing other states. I don't know that
Well,
were doing
what
it the
happened
last
was-
time, but I don't know if they're doing it now.
I think they did it in the other states as the kickoff. I think it was March 1st. I think it was. They had the kickoff in all the other states, and they're continuing to organize. If people can't get there, of course, I can't get there. I wish I could, but my granddaughter's college graduation party is that day. And
You don't forget it. I had my son Washington one time.
Well, I'm already hiding in Texas. So.
Sure did.
what was
I'm out of
that
town.
like, Mike?
The one thing that really bothered me the most, those horses are big. And
Oh,
one
the
of them
police
bumped-
horses?
One of them bumped into me. And so I told him, be cool. He said, "Well, I don't want to get bumped into too often here. I was good, really do. Get up there, And Tracy Coleman, I think her name was, who sang Revolution. She was there as the singer of the song.
Tracy Chapman?
Yep. She was
Wow. You really like her, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It was really great.
It is. But
Me-
there's
me-
no.
Me and two other people from North Island went.
That's fantastic.
It is, and there is, and there's no arguing with the need. I mean, poverty is self-evident. Whether even we like to say we're rich in Massachusetts, but we're in the poorest county in Massachusetts, so we see it.
There's poverty all over.
It is.
You are sitting at a table with two impoverished people here. I
Yes.
have been impoverished and been fighting housing and against for decent housing. I was almost evicted. Mike and Peggy almost lost their house.
Yep.
So it is right here, present. I think when Reverend Barber was talking about how many people did not vote, something like thousands that did not vote in the last election, I think part of that might be people are so overwhelmed just trying to survive, maybe working 2 or 3 jobs. But also, one of the things I think I've said before is you have to have somebody to vote for. And we have so many entrenched politicians that need to get out. Of course, I've talked before about we need term limits, and people have to get involved on the local level, and it has to be ongoing. It's very hard for people who are poor trying to feed their children or feed themselves or pay their rent or not be evicted or be evicted and they're out on the street. What do they do?
But the first step, I think, is to register to vote. Even though things are frustrating, I think it's worth going out there in our community, and I think we should do this right in North Adams. Go down the high rise, go down all the apartment buildings, go to the apartment houses in North Adams. You know people are frustrated, but try to explain to them the correlation, you know, with if you're registered to vote and you participate, then you can plan to act, you can run, you can get involved in campaigns, and you can push the dialogue so that you're not ignored. And that's what Reverend Barber is trying to do. He's putting people up who, like that man that was up and says, I'm sick and tired of working 80 hours a week. You know, you don't have to go far. I mean, I was just on a walk today and I ran into a man that, you know, he's of retirement age, but he's got physical problems. He's, you know, and he's talking about he's got to go get a job. There's no reason why he should, in his 70s or close to 70, have to go out and get a job and worry about that. You know, he's, you know, he's got health issues. You know, I was listening to Michael Moore this morning talking about it. He said, you know, there's no reason why elderly people should be charged anything for their health care. You know, if people live this long, that's what Medicare is all about. You know, to relieve the burden on elderly people. They've made their contribution. And they should,
but Medicare is only covering 80%, which is outrageous.
It should be covering everything. You know, and that's, you know, but he's got health problems, he's got some financial problems. It's you know, people all over the country, their needs aren't being met. And like one of the women said, it's the richest country in the world.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be having this problem.
But we have this problem because the entrenched powers that be, including politicians, but also businesses, corporations, everything else.
Warmongering.
Right. Our election system is financed because of the Supreme Court has ruled that money equals speech, and also says,
oh my God, Citizens United, it makes me crazy.
And corporations are people. We tried to address that last week, but you know, those issues, though, you know, with corporations being treated as people, although they don't go to jail, like,
and they don't die per se,
and they only have one interest, and that's making more money. You know, it's just a profit motive. And then when the Supreme Court says they have the right to spend as much money as they want, and it even goes beyond our borders. There's other countries, rich people in other countries can spend money and do what they can to influence the election. There's an election tomorrow in the 16th district in New York that a man is running for re-election, but he was perceived to be sympathetic to the Palestinian plight of the genocide that's going on there, the deaths of young children, and he's been targeted by a special interest group, not for his stand on not wanting a ceasefire in Palestine. They're just attacking him on all the other issues, saying he's not for this or he's not for that. But they're spending, this is on a primary campaign. They're spending millions and millions of dollars to get this guy out of office because they don't want people who stand up and say peace. Let's give peace a chance. You know,
look at what's being spent on the presidential. Billions. The most costly ever in our history.
We shouldn't.
I mean, that's just awful.
We shouldn't have to deal with that type of money.
Gumming up the works.
Right. I mean, we're better off. It would be better off for everybody if we just had publicly financed campaigns that allowed anybody that qualified to run for an office to receive X amount of dollars and use that money and just tell us what you think and let people evaluate that. There shouldn't be billion, you know.
Should not be party primaries. There should be open primaries. I think for me personally, I believe the parties are the problem. I don't care which party. They are the problem. And I think it goes back to George Washington, worried about that, the power in the parties themselves and the amount of money, and also their selection of candidates. So if it gets, if you get too entrenched as a party,
I don't see
everybody
I don't see the party, myself, I don't see the parties as the problem. I see the money and influence that's spent within them, because there's no way that you can tell people that they can't associate. I mean, how can you, just like forming a union. Well, that's what a party is. It's a group of people that associate politically. But the money that goes in there that influence those parties and influence the politicians within those parties, I think is the problem. It's just, we have the right to assemble, we have the right to associate, but...
and all that. I know you had 2 other videos lined up.
I know I have one more I want to show. It talks about elections. It talks about the Electoral College, but
it's another one.
I'm sorry that we went on a little bit, but poverty is
it's all connected.
Yeah.
Oh, it
Even
is.
if you and I disagree on some arenas, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the Robert Reich.
I like Robert Reich.
Election reform that he is promoting.
Should someone else's vote count more than yours? For 80% of Americans, that's exactly what's happening. Their vote for president isn't nearly as valuable as the vote of someone in a so-called swing state. Most of us live in states that have become so predictably Democratic or Republican that we're taken for granted by candidates. Presidential elections now turn on the dwindling number of swing states that could go either way, which gives voters in those states huge leverage. The 2020 election came down to just over 40,000 votes, spread across just 3 swing states. 2016 came down to fewer than 80,000 votes, also across 3 states. In those elections, the national popular vote wasn't nearly that close. In fact, in the last 5 elections, the winners of the popular vote beat their opponents by an average of 5 million votes. The current state-by-state electoral college system of electing presidents is creating ever closer contests in an ever smaller divided states for elections that aren't really. Not only that, but these razor-thin swing state margins can invite post-election recounts, audits, and lawsuits, even attempted coups. A losing candidate might be able to overturn 40,000 votes with these techniques. Overturning 5 million would be nearly impossible. The current system presents a growing threat to the peaceful transition of power. It also strips us of our individual power. If you're a New York Republican or an Alabama Democrat, presidential candidates have little incentive to try and win your vote under the current system. They don't need broad popular support as much as a mobilized base in a handful of swing states. Campaigning to a smaller and more radical base is also leading to uglier, more divisive campaigns. And it's becoming more and more likely that candidates are elected president without winning the most votes nationwide. It's already happened twice this century. Now, abolishing the Electoral College should be the ultimate goal. But this requires a constitutional amendment, which is almost impossible to pull off because it would need a 2/3 vote by Congress, plus approval by 3/4 of all state legislatures. But in the meantime, there is an alternative, and it starts with getting our states to join the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Now, don't let that mouthful put you off. It could save our democracy. This compact would guarantee the presidency to the candidate who receives the most popular votes nationwide without a constitutional amendment. How does it work? The Constitution assigns each state a number of electors equal to its number of representatives and senators. As of now, the total number of electors is 538. So anyone who gets 270 or more of those electoral college votes becomes president. Article 2 of the Constitution allows state legislatures to award their electors any way they want. So all that's needed is for states with a total of at least 270 electoral votes to agree to award all their electoral votes to the presidential candidate who wins the national popular vote. The movement to do this is already underway. 15 states and the District of Columbia have joined the compact, agreeing that once enough states join, all their electoral votes will go to the popular vote winner. Together, states in the compact have 195 electoral votes. So we just need a few more states with at least 75 electors to join the compact, and it's done. Popular vote laws have recently been introduced in Michigan and Minnesota, which, if passed, would bring the total to 220. Now, naturally, this plan will face legal challenges. There are a lot of powerful interests who stand to benefit by maintaining the current system. But if we keep up the fight and get enough states on board, America will never again elect a president who loses the national popular vote. No longer would 80% of us be effectively disenfranchised from presidential campaigns. And a handful of votes in swing states would no longer determine the winner. If you want to know more or get involved, click the link below to read about the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. If your state is not already a member, I urge you to contact your state senators and reps to get your state on board.
Right, because this actually requires it to come from the state legislature.
Yes.
So, and all forth. I mean, it's encouraging that there are already 195 electoral votes pledged that way, if and when they hit the 270. I mean, Texas would be your logical target because it's got the next biggest trough.
Yeah. I just, just remember as a kid growing up, and I read once in a magazine or in a history book that actually it happened once where someone became president that didn't get the most votes. It sounded so crazy to me. Thought, oh my God, it happened once? Yeah. That was awful.
And
but now, in the
happened
past 20 years, it's happened twice.
Yep. Yeah. And could happen thrice.
And the first time I blame first when it happened with Gore versus Bush,
we blame the Supreme Court.
I blame the Supreme Court because they could have very easily said the person with the most votes nationally wins the election and strike down the Electoral College. And just
it would have been easy.
Yeah.
That would have been easy, but they didn't do it.
Of course not. And then, awful. Of course, once again, you've got a polarized Supreme Court.
Oh, you'll never,
even more so now. So our institutions. I had not heard of that. I find it quite interesting. What Robert Reich. I like his messages.
Yeah.
He's really putting out some good messages, I think, and I'm glad you used them on the April 4th Coalition.
Well, we have one more. It's on economics. Trump economics.
Trump.
He comes out against what's being put forth by.
I'm assuming this is the new plan, not the past.
I don't know. Let's hear what he has to say.
Trump and Republicans want to wreck your bank account. Here are 5 things you need to know about Trumponomics. Number 1, Trump wants to cut taxes for the rich at your expense.
You're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts?
Trump's tax cuts for the rich and big corporations added about $1.7 trillion to the national debt, with few benefits trickling down to the middle class. In fact, it raised taxes for more than 10 million American families. Now Trump and Republicans want to make the tax cuts for the rich permanent, blowing up the debt even further. And then they'll use that debt to justify this. Number 2, Trump would cut Social Security and Medicare, programs you have been paying into.
There is a lot you can do in terms of entitlements, in terms of cutting.
That's your money Trump's talking about cutting into. Since saying that, he's tried to walk it back, but look at his record. In every year of his presidency, Trump submitted a budget that tried to cut Social Security and Medicare. And he knows that's the only way he can even begin to pay for extending his tax cuts for the rich. Number 3, if Trump gets back in the White House, buckle up for more junk fees. When the Biden administration issued a rule capping credit card late fees at $8, Senator Tim Scott, a Trump surrogate, tried to overturn it in the Senate. And then a Trump-appointed judge issued a temporary injunction that blocked the rule from taking effect. Eliminating that rule would cost American families an estimated $10 billion a year. And when the Biden administration required airlines to issue automatic refunds for canceled flights, Trump's allies in Congress fought to block that too. When Trump was in office, his administration fought against efforts to rein in airline junk fees. Corporations nickel and diming us like this makes inflation worse. Number 4, Trump would send healthcare costs soaring. Republicans have committed to repealing the Inflation Reduction Act, which would strip Medicare of the ability to negotiate drug prices and let Big Pharma send the price of insulin and other life-saving medicines back through the roof. And Trump is still fixated on repealing Obamacare, with no plan to replace it.
Obamacare is a disaster. And I said, we're gonna do something about it.
That would strip coverage from tens of millions of Americans, drive up premiums, and let insurers charge more or deny coverage to people with pre-existing conditions. Number 5, if you got student debt, you're out of luck with Trump. In contrast to President Biden, who's approved cancellation of more than $160 billion of student debt so far, Trump is against student debt relief. In his first term, Trump tried to eliminate the popular public service loan forgiveness program for people like teachers and nurses. Student debt hurts not just the roughly 40 million Americans burdened by it, but the entire economy, since Americans with debt have less money to spend, are less likely to start a business, less likely to buy a home, and more likely to rely on government assistance. The MAGA agenda would make nearly every aspect of your life more expensive, while making the richest Americans even richer. Teddy Roosevelt's economic plan was called the Square Deal. Franklin Roosevelt's was the New Deal. What Trump is offering is simply a raw deal.
I had a feeling he was going that way with that, with raw deal. Oh, and it definitely is.
And the national debt keeps going up and up and
And
up.
up and up.
And the tax cuts in that presidency were horrific.
Don't really Rich is going to take care of the problem. He's going to organize enough people. He's going to march on Washington, by gosh.
Yeah, there's those people.
I'll be right behind
and
you.
get them to vote, you know, just like in our.
Well, even to get them on the telephone, if you can't go out and organize, or if you can't run for office, you could pick up the phone and call your state or federal representative or U.S. senator, and you could speak up.
You can.
You could have ways, even if you are
Well, Ralph
homebound.
Nader is like pushing people. Oh, we only have 30 seconds left. To call your elected officials to your town and cause, you know, let's
Cause a ruckus.
Let's ask them to have a meeting and reset the agenda, and you
Yep.
listen.
Hey, that sounds pretty good.
But anyways,
We
we're
could
gonna
do
be
that right
taking-
here
yeah.
at NBCTC.
And anyway, Dick wanted to say that we're going to be taking a hiatus for the month of July, so that you'll be seeing encore presentation of shows.
Yeah. Power to the people.
Power to the people.
And
Thank
remember,
you.
poverty is the enemy.
Power to the people. Come every time.
There's power in a factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood, with mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches for